This video is going to be really special. It's been almost a year since I've been thinking about doing a video like this, right after Valentine's Half Month 5, and regards of Valentine's Half Month 6 cancelled, it's not gonna stop me on making a video and making it my first Wednesday's video of this new schedule. And considering that one of the episodes in this video was going to be Cartoon Crisis 3 related, and I ended up dropping it after thinking about it, really made this idea really better, because for the first time, I'm gonna be comparing 3 episodes rather than 2. And this video is gonna be much more longer, but in all honesty, it's a good start to start off this 1 week of upload per week. And to tell you the truth, this Gravity Falls video idea was honestly something I've had in mind ever since that Roadside Attraction didn't end up becoming bad as I thought it was, but at the same time, it still doesn't stand a chance against the other 2 episodes that are way better than that. The purpose of this video centered around these 3 episodes is the fact that Dipper is the main character in all of them, and it centers around her relationship and interaction with 3 girl characters. Wendy from Into the Bunker, Pacifica from Northwest Mansion Mystery, and Candy from Roadside Attraction. This is honestly the mouthful of all mouthfuls when it comes to the title. And when it comes to the context of this video itself, it really centers around people shipping Dipper with Wendy, Dipper with Pacifica, and even a few people shipping Dipper with Candy. Honestly, this idea came into mind, really made me think that there was a lot more going on when it comes to these episodes, because Into the Bunker before that had backlash centering around Dipper's obsession with Wendy, and people were actually enjoying the shipping of Dipper and Pacifica in Northwest Mansion Mystery. And when it comes to Roadside Attraction, I tried to understand the criticisms towards that episode to the point that it led to the show jumping the shark, and with it being the worst episode. But at the same time, this was also during the time where I didn't realize that there was another Gravity Falls episode that is worse than Roadside Attraction. So what am I gonna be doing is mainly talk about the plots of these 3 episodes first, and I'll talk about the critiques and my perspective on what the episodes did right and what the episodes did the opposite. And I'm also probably going to be comparing the antagonists as well, because to tell you the truth, the antagonists in these 3 episodes are probably the saving grace if you ignore the writing quality of the least contender of all 3. Into the Bunker starts off with Dipper and Wendy watching a horror movie that is less scary to them, and Dipper offers Wendy to come with him on his next journey, even though that he was intentionally trying to tell his true feelings towards her, which he backs out like usual. Mabel, who figure out that Dipper hasn't moved on from Wendy, decides to take matters into her own hands by having Dipper being pushed into another room with Wendy, and he won't allow them back in unless Dipper confesses his feelings towards Wendy. But considering that this is Dipper we're talking about, he still refuses until, well, we'll get to that when we get to that. Let's go talk about Northwest Mansion Mystery. The episode starts off with Pacifica's parents dealing with a crisis that a ghost is wrecking their annual party, which leads to Pacifica going to Dipper so that he can stop the ghost itself. Dipper manages to trap the ghost into the silver meal, which he manages to save the party itself, but at the same time, he figures out a truth that the reason onto why the ghost was destroying the party to begin with is because the lumberjack, who is the ghost along with his associates, who made the entire mansion, isn't getting yearly parties like they promised. To be honest with you, the backlash centering around Dipper's obsession with Wendy really affected that story as much as people hoped who were actually into that story. It somewhat affected this episode's progression when it comes to Pacifica's character, since that this is the only episode where she and Dipper work together. But before we get into all that, let's get into the third episode, Roadside Attraction. While Uncle Stan is preparing the road trip, Dipper can't be able to get over his obsession with Wendy, so he gets some advices from Uncle Stan, which is really the bad advices that he shouldn't take, and to tell you the truth, this would have been better off if Wendy was giving Dipper advices on how to talk to girls, but let's get into that more later since we're still in the plot. While Dipper is asking girls out when it comes to getting their phone numbers and addresses, Candy has developed a crush towards Dipper, which leads to Mabel trying to make this whole relationship between Dipper and Candy to work. But at the same time, Dipper isn't really into Candy whatsoever, to the point that it leads to all the girls that he got email addresses and phone numbers from ended up calling him off due to figuring out that he was with Candy, even though it was a huge misunderstanding. With all three plots of the 3 episodes all taken care of, or aside from the climaxes, I'm gonna be real with you that the episodes of what they have in common centering around Dipper's relationship with 3 girls really got me more invested on the ideal, mainly the fact that thinking about it a lot more when it comes to Into the Bunker, well, it ends off with Wendy figuring out Dipper's secret, even though that she always figured it out before Into the Bunker, all the while that the Pacifica episode was the only episode centering around Dipper and Pacifica, which still led to a huge shipping between the two. And for Roadside Attraction, it still has major problems, but I don't hate it as much as other people do. The thing that made me convinced on including this in this type of video is mainly the fact that it has potential, but at the same time, for how it was being in the position of one of the final episodes of Season 2, while also being the final fiddle episode, these 3 episodes have missed potential due to the backlash of Dipper's obsession with Wendy. And to tell you the truth, with these 3 episodes taking place in the 2nd season, which ended up becoming the final season of Gravity Falls, which saying that as the 2nd season just feels odd to think about. After watching all 3 of these episodes and their different qualities aside from the elements that are the topic of this video, I felt like that these episodes would have been a lot more better and interesting if there was a continuation of Gravity Falls when it comes to having it a 3rd season and not ending it at the 2nd season. Because to tell you the truth, whenever I think about Gravity Falls only having 2 seasons, it didn't bother me at first, but after thinking about it, it really feels like that the shows that don't get a 3rd season, mainly the Ghost and Molly McGee and the Owl House, granted the 3 44-minute episodes or specials were technically part of Season 3, but not a complete Season 3, would have had the chances on expanding characters and the interactions, and of course the relationships, to the point that we'll probably get more moments centering around Dipper and Pacifica, because when it comes to Northwest Mansion Mystery, it's the best out of the 3 episodes. However, knowing full well that this was right after Wendy figured out that Dipper had a crush on her, it really feels like that this episode was growing a shipping fanbase, well, not really a shipping fanbase, but a huge shipping coronation for mainly the wrong reasons. I mean, don't get me wrong, this ship isn't a problem, I can understand that, but at the same time, it happened at bad timing when it comes to the fact that this is the last time where Pacifica became a main character in this show. Let me just say this for a fact that after watching her appearances in previous episodes, and even though that she contribute when it comes to the Wheelmageddon episodes briefly, it doesn't change the fact that this episode alone, with it being her final appearance, kinda shows that they weren't planning on having episodes centering around her and Dipper. Granted, it could, but if only that the backlash of Dipper's crush towards Wendy didn't take full effect. Another element that really damages the backlash that's centered around the topic is the fact that Wendy doesn't get much development, and with her being mostly a love interest towards Dipper, I'll admit there should be more centering around that, but the more I think about it and how Wendy was portrayed after this episode, it really feels like that this entire episode exists due to the backlash. And to tell you the truth, I can guarantee you that if the backlash never happened, we would have seen Wendy in another episode, considering that aside from the Girls episode, well, she was with Mabel and her friends, it really feels like that she doesn't contribute to much other than the fact that she's mostly a supporting character at most. I'm gonna be one of the only people to think that the whole Dipper and Wendy plotline would have improved Wendy's character and actually tried to contribute something when it comes to how her portrayal would have been like if the backlash never happened. Because to tell you the truth, no matter what you think about Dipper and Pacifica, and to a small extent Dipper and Candy, it really feels like that the whole focus centering around Wendy in this is mainly her interactions with Dipper. Even though the Into the Bunker centers around the shapeshifter and the mystery centering around Gravity Falls itself, but at the same time, with the focus centering around Wendy being part of the journey, it really feels like that the most of the journeys that she come across from time to time in these episodes are mainly there just so that she can do something. And trust me when I say this, is that Season 2 really made Wendy the least useful in comparison to Season 1, mainly in a character standpoint on how she's developed. She is helpful, don't get me wrong, when it comes to the Wheelmageddon episodes, but every time Into the Bunker reminds me that the main plot point of the series is what really matters, and Wendy being part of this is mainly just trying to wrap up the plot as quickly as possible. It really makes the Into the Bunker storyline on its own somewhat interesting if you completely ignore the Dipper and Wendy interactions. But at the same time, the age gap in this show between Dipper and Wendy is nowhere near as bad in comparison to the other age gaps from other cartoons, even though I have mixed opinions on some of them. As for Roadside Attraction, trust me, I understand that this episode is one of the worst when it comes to the perspective of the fans. And I totally understand that this taking place before the final episodes that really carry the main plot is a bad idea. However, I still can't blame myself to hate this episode, mainly the fact that despite the many problems, it's still not Cartoon Crisis 3 material. It's probably the fact that the problems centering around it, well, this episode is supposed to be a road trip story, well, outside of Gravity Falls is what's really the main highlight of it all. It's overshadowed due to one of Mabel's friends at Gravity Falls, Candy, who developed a crush towards Dipper. I'm gonna be really honest with you, with the amount of times that Candy interacted Dipper in previous episodes, and up until now that she's developing a crush, is honestly the most out of nowhere element or story plotline that you can think of, to the point that It just makes me think that they just wanted to do something different, but at the same time, I agree, people, that this is definitely fanfiction. This entire episode is nearly 100% fanfiction. To, well, whenever I see Candy on screen, she acts like someone that she never met Dipper before, even though that she already did, while she's doing something during the climax to save everyone, and for how she gets rewarded despite the fact that she doesn't really deserve to get rewarded, mainly of how Dipper wasn't fully aware of Candy being into him in the first place. Honestly, it's difficult to take her character any credibility even when she accomplished something during the climax. Honestly, anyone can put up a stunt of what Candy did in this, and giving her credibility would have been one thing if it had nothing to do with her crush towards Dipper. Trust me when I say this, with the climax of this episode being the least interested in comparison to the other climaxes from the other 2 episodes, I can't be able to get into this shipping thing with Dipper and Candy even if I tried. That's how much that this entire episode, despite its quality, is completely worthless. Honestly, whenever I see Mabel's friends in these episodes, including Northwest Mansion Mystery, where they try to fight each other, well, not really fight each other, but going against each other in order to be with a guy, even though that they ended up doing that in season 1 with a boy band. I'm gonna be really honest with you that these characters, even though that they're not terrible, they're just giving a terrible direction on how they're portrayed. And that's mainly in the point of view of Mabel's character, for how she's been portrayed poorly in the 2nd season. Because I know full well that people have been criticizing her character when it comes to these types of episodes. But at the same time, the reason why I'm bringing it up is because with Mabel being Dipper's sister, it's becoming redundant to see her calling out Dipper for what he did in Roadside Attraction, even though that she did a lot more worse when it comes to having Robbie drink a love potion and having one of Wendy's friends be with him. And in all honesty, the more I think about it, it really feels like that every time I see Dipper in Roadside Attraction, it really feels like that he has no control of the situation. I understand he took advices from Uncle Stan. Obviously, it's not going to work out for him. But at the same time, with the amount of times that Mabel has done terrible things that really went overboard, it really feels like that the only person that he did well is Mamondo. And yes, I did spell his name correctly. You see, I've come across a video called Is Mabel Pines Worth the Hate? I watched it from beginning to end, and to tell you the truth, for how she was criticized for what she did in occasions, mainly the Love Gods episode, it really made me think that every time I see Mabel in these episodes, it really feels like that whole morals are just mainly out the window, mainly of her just trying to be popular for what she can do when it comes to her personality, while Dipper is the total opposite. And when I saw information about Mabel originally dying in the end of season 2, I'm gonna be real with you, they probably wanted this whole thing of Mabel proving to Dipper that she can take things seriously, but at the same time, I'm pretty sure that people will probably cry in depression and wouldn't like the idea that one of the main characters who are popular died. I know this has nothing to do with the topic itself, but to tell you the truth, with Mabel contributing something into the bunker and Roadside Attraction, while in Northwest Mansion Mystery she's mostly in a subplot with her friends, it really feels like the message from the 2nd episode of Real Mageddon centering around Mabel's fantasy world by escaping reality was honestly a huge focus that really hammered down on her being doing whatever she wants, while Dipper always gets the short end of the stick and mostly do things right for his sister. Honestly, even though that it's important for relatives to look out for each other, the problem is that it still sacrifices Dipper's development. And to tell you the truth of what this episode and Roadside Attraction have in common when it comes to Mabel is mainly the fact that whenever she does things similar to Dipper when it comes to having a crush towards any person in general, she has multiple while Dipper only has one, and that's Wendy. And whenever I think of that, it really feels like that they really put more focus on Dipper's relationship with Wendy more than anything of what Mabel is into, whether if it's Momondo, even if it may be better than the other boys that she hung out with or want to be with. It really feels like that Dipper's motivation on impressing Wendy was mainly in a realistic standpoint that makes him better in comparison to Mabel. Because to tell you the truth, whenever I look at Mabel's relationship with the other men characters that she's into, it's honestly mostly for comedy. And to tell you the truth, whenever I think about comedy over characters that are mostly taking themselves seriously, despite Dipper being too obsessive over Wendy, it makes me think that Mabel has no shame of anything of what she does because she gets the easy way in, while Dipper can't be able to have an easy way in when all he gets is the hard way to impress Wendy. Let me be real with you that the reason onto why that Dipper hasn't given up on Wendy on Roadside Attraction is because, to tell you the truth, they weren't even planning on doing this decision into the bunker if it wasn't for the backlash. Because in Dungeons and Dungeons and more dungeons, Dipper completely stated that maybe I should go back to loving Wendy again. That just kind of shows that they weren't planning on doing any of this whatsoever. And that quote from that episode alone from Dipper really shows that they weren't intentionally trying to make an episode like Roadside Attraction. Let me tell you that every time I think about Pacifica in her last episode, while dealing with the fact that the other two episodes have problems due to the backlash behind Into the Bunker, really made me think that they were that they didn't intentionally try to make this whole relationship of Dipper and Pacifica becoming a thing. And even though that some people may say they're never going to have a life with each other, like boyfriend and girlfriend, or husband and wife and all that kind of stuff, because to tell you the truth, knowing full well that Dipper wants to be in the position of Uncle Stan's brother, Ford, so that he can actually do what he does best, it really made me feel like that what Dipper's future is going to be like is probably going to be nowhere in the same levels as Pacifica's future. Now, I will admit, one of the best moments in Northwest Mansion Mystery is where Pacifica told Dipper that she's too scared to talk back to her parents. And the fact that her being rich and cheating at life, which is what Dipper said in the golfing episode, is really true. And to tell you the truth, if she kept that character trait forever, it would be difficult for me to see her being in a relationship with Dipper. But at the same time, with this episode being at a position that was out of pure luck, or mainly of how the characters were executed due to backlash, it made me think that Pacifica's character was mainly done in a way that people just prefer her more than Wendy because she is in the same age as Dipper. And let's get into the whole age gap between Dipper and Wendy. After they defeated the shapeshifter, Wendy told Dipper, after knowing the truth, well, technically she knew all along, that she was flattered, but at the same time she's too old for him. Wendy is 15 and Dipper is 12. And she told him that if he wasn't if she wasn't her friend, then she would have fallen off a cliff. In all honesty, with this ending showcasing this interaction between Dipper and Wendy, it really feels like that there could have been a lot more of them if they actually put focus on the development rather than listening to the backlash. Because to tell you the truth, they weren't going physical with this, and to tell you the truth, the age gap of 12 and 15 isn't really all that bad in comparison to Adventure Time when it comes to Bubblegum being 1,000 years old and Finn being in his teen years. To be brutally honest, when Dipper stated of him thinking about Wendy in Dungeons, and more Dungeons, it really feels like a slight jab towards the people who caused the backlash to happen. Granted, it wasn't physical, but at the same time, that's really what I feel like, considering that Wendy's ex-boyfriend, Robbie, is a lot more worse, and considering of how he's portrayed in the first season, all the while of how he's portrayed in Love God, to tell you the truth, there were a lot of missed opportunities, and mainly so many different directions of having the characters that really makes this entire dynamic between Wendy and Dipper feel misleading. I mean, whenever I say misleading, it's mainly of how the plot itself is executed between the relationship of the two. And I really feel like that the only way that they're ever going to make a huge comeback when it comes to this relationship is if they can actually focus on the relationship and ignore the backlash. Because the only thing that actually feels like they gave us what we wanted of Dipper and Wendy is mainly them working together in the Wheel to Mageddon episodes and them trading hats. Honestly, with them trading hats, it really feels like that they were planning on continuing with this relationship if they ignored the backlash. But if they're really going to go through the backlash completely, I'm gonna be real with you that if Roadside Attraction had the potential to be an okay episode or a good episode, especially when it comes to Dipper's interactions with Candy, all the while Candy having a crush towards Dipper, it would have been alright if Wendy was the one who gave Dipper advices on talking to girls. Considering that she had advice, since that she had so many boyfriends, it really feels like that the relationships that she had with those boyfriends weren't that difficult, considering that she improved on talking to boys, and considering that she cannot stand high school, even though that she can come across boys multiple times, it really feels like that Wendy has so much going on that it will probably require a mini-series centering around her to flesh out her character. If the biggest reason of Uncle Stan giving Dipper advices on talking to girls is for him to prank people outside of Gravity Falls, all the while flirting with a woman who is a spider, they could still do those elements, but at the same time, they can still tweak the story a bit. Because whenever I see Wendy being ass-bent from this episode, it really feels like that they really don't know what to do with her completely. That's really what it feels like when it comes to Roadside Attraction itself. Or if we really wanted the relationship of Dipper and Pacifica to work, have her tag along in the episode Roadside Attraction and see if Dipper can flirt with Pacifica and still have Wendy be part of it and still have the same structures as before with tweets along the way. In all honesty, with these ideas in mind, it really feels like that the elements of making Roadside Attraction worth watching would have worked if Wendy was a part of it, and maybe as Pacifica tag along to have Dipper flirt with her. Because as far as I'm concerned, even though that there was no flirting whatsoever in Northwest mansion mystery, it really feels like that they can still make a sequel out of it. I'm not sure if I would enjoy a different version of Roadside Attraction that I make up when it comes to the show's execution of the idea, but to tell you the truth, it kind of made me convinced that they were really trying to do a lot more when it comes to Dipper and Wendy's relationship, but with the backlash gained in the way, they can still make up for it for doing different ideas by handling characters like Pacifica to work out with Dipper talking to girls. Because to tell you the truth, Dipper talking to Pacifica, even though the Pacifica is a witch girl who is mean in the previous season, she has improved, and to tell you the truth, it's honestly a missed opportunity when it comes to shippers, and probably giving this a different direction that will have made this shipping thing between Dipper and Pacifica work. And do you see of how much that this shipping thing between Dipper and Candy won't work? I'm not bashing on it, but at the same time, it still has problems that really made Roadside Attraction one of the least best of Gravity Falls. And if that's mainly of how people view it on bashing it to the ground, in all honesty, there are a lot more worse episodes than this, and saying this as the worst Gravity Falls episode isn't saying a lot when it comes to other worst episodes from other cartoons. Regardless of what you say about Dipper's character when it comes to his obsession with Ford and his interest in what he's into, especially with the mysteries that he solves in Gravity Falls, and him narrating this show from the first episode and the last episode, at the same time, he still deserves more, because to tell you the truth, he's one of my favorite characters from the show, and me stating of him having a deeper voice in my first Gravity Falls review, the inconveniencing, I really think a little too much of loving this show when it comes to first impressions. I'm just saying, whenever I think about these actors voicing these characters, it really feels like that even though that there's passion into these episodes, there's always awkwardness and weirdnesses behind these episodes that really carry the show as a whole. And honestly, Weirdmageddon was honestly something that would never replicate in the future, along with the other episodes, because to tell you the truth, this show was at a time where it can be able to escape with everything for the execution that it has, all except Dipper's obsession with Wendy. So before we head into the conclusion of 3 episodes, let's go talk about the antagonists of the 3 episodes. The shapeshifter who Dipper thought is the author, I'm gonna be real with you, he is really interesting, and he actually made the climax a lot more entertaining when it comes to two Wendys facing off each other, which leads to the real Wendy giving him a sign that she is the real her because she wouldn't flirt at him whatsoever. Not gonna lie, one of the most underrated antagonist kills from the show. Granted, he ended up turning into Dipper while being frozen inside of a chamber, but at the same time, still one of the most underrated deaths from the show. The lumberjack ghost from Northwest Mansion Mystery is my favorite, mainly in the fact that even though it was mainly Pacifica's parents' fault for having Dipper to do all the dirty work along with their grandparents' and great-great-grandparents', it really shows that this lumberjack ghost is willing to haunt people because they didn't get what they want, and when Pacifica gave the lumberjack what he and the people outside of the mansion what they want by being part of the party, justice is one of the only morals that I appreciate the most when it comes to these episodes, expressing it when it comes to the end of the climax. Believe me when I say this, justice, when it's done in the same ways of what this episode has done, is what really made me appreciate it. As for Darlene, who is a spy in disguise, who Uncle Stan is flirting with, To be real with you, with her being mostly the best of what this episode has to offer, and the fact that the climax is mainly overshadowed due to Candy's development, I can't be able to take her seriously on being intimidated, even though that she put Augustin in a web, like with the other people that she put in webs. And honestly, if this episode was trying to focus on Candy's crush towards Dipper, all the while Dipper flirting with other girls, and it doesn't have any of the ideals that I have in mind, then it's becoming an afterthought. Believe me when I say this, when one of the antagonists of Gravity Falls, who are monsters, ended up becoming an afterthought, which shows that Roadside Attraction is one of the least favorite episodes of the entire series. This was an interesting project that really has a lot of different perspectives here and there, especially comparing 3 episodes with each other. But believe me, I wasn't planning on scrapping it due to my schedules changing. I still wanted to express my opinions on the ships involving Dipper, Wendy, Dipper Pacifica, and Dipper and Candy. But considering that I was originally going to wrap everything up when it comes to Valentine's Half Month 6 with this, I really felt like that it's a huge missed opportunity, but at the same time, the review for next Wednesday, which is on Valentine's Day, is a Valentine's Day episode, and to tell you the truth, it's literally the only way to celebrate Valentine's Day, despite not doing Valentine's Half Month 6. But at the same time, I still made this video a reality. Even though it's another long video, at the same time, I knew this was bound to happen. And regardless of what I'm going to be doing in the future months before Summerpalooza 5, I'm not going to be making another long video, just as long as this video was. Besides, since I've been talking about Wendy in most of my Gravity Falls videos, at this point I'd rather move on to focusing on other elements from this show when I get the chance. Mainly the Love God, which I might be able to do as Cartoon Crisis 3 material, but at the same time, I'm not going to be doing another Gravity Falls video due to the schedule changes and what I have in store during the summer. Believe me when I say this, I might be able to review more episodes from this show, but at the same time, don't expect me to go full-on nerd on everything involving this show because I'm not a huge fan of this show. So to wrap up this video when it comes to me ranking on which ship I prefer Dipper and Wendy, Dipper and Pacifica in second, and of course Dipper and Candy in third place. At the same time, even if they're way low when it comes to the ranking, at the same time, it's still third place because I don't think that there's another person in this show that Dipper can easily be shipped with. So it's honestly the only positive when it comes to Dipper and Candy shipping. And no, I'm not qualifying Pine Says shipping, don't worry. I'm giving Into the Bunker a 7.5 out of 10, while Northwest Mansion Mystery gets an 8.5 out of 10, while Roadside Attraction gets a 5.5 out of 10.